Hallo, ek is Edie. Welkom by my kanaal waar ons als saam doen. Today we take a look at three of the most basic conjunctions, I think in both English and Afrikaans. The ones I'm referring to in English are and, or, and, but. We'll start with the most simple one, which I think is and we'll work our way up to the one that is most complex, which is but. En. That is the Afrikaans for the English and. Ek en jy. Ek en jy. That in English is you and I. If you would translate that literally, it would be me and you, or I and you, but the correct way in English is you and I. Ek en jy. My hond en my kat. My hond en my kat. My dog and my cat. Die jas is geel, rooi en pers. Die jas is geel, rooi en pers. The coat is yellow, red and purple. Keep in mind that we do not use a comma before en. In Afrikaans, unlike in American English where you use a comma before and, in British English you do not use a comma before and it's the same in Afrikaans. Except if for some other reason you really want there to be a definite pause in the sentence before you follow that by en or before you follow that by and, only then will you use a comma. But in general, when you use en, there is no comma in front of it. Of, the Afrikaans word for or. Verkies jy blou of pink? Verkies jy blou of pink? Do you prefer blue or pink? Ons kan stap of swem. Ons kan stap of swem. We can walk or swim. Wil jy vis of hoender hê? Wil jy vis of hoender hê? Do you want fish or chicken? Okay, so now we take a look at the word maar. Maar, which is the Afrikaans word for but. Maar is also like the word mos in Afrikaans, in that we use it to accentuate in some circumstances, and then it is not a conjunction. So keep that in mind for just a little bit later in this video. Maar also always has a comma in front of it. So if you write a part of a sentence and you want to use maar, you have to use whatever you're saying, comma, maar. The first case that we're going to take a look at is using maar as a conjunction when it connects two independent clauses. So that means the first part of the sentence can, if you would like to, stand alone and it makes sense. And the second part of the sentence after maar can also be used alone as a sentence and that makes sense. And in this case, maar just connects the two. So this is the first case where we will use maar. Ek is honger, maar ons het nie kos nie. Ek is honger, maar ons het nie kos nie. I am hungry, but we don't have food. Ek swem vinnig, maar Sunny swem baie vinniger. Ek swem vinnig, maar Sunny swem baie vinniger. I swim fast, but Sunny swims much faster. The second case is when you want to reply to somebody's statement or question with a yes or a no, and then you want to explain yourself or you want to elaborate after the yes or no. Then you have, like in this case, ja, maar hoekom kan ek nie saamgaan nie? Yes, but why can't I go along? So in this case, the person you're speaking to would have told you, listen, you can't come along on this trip. And now you want to know, okay, which is another word you can use and then a comma. Okay, maar hoekom kan ek nie saamgaan nie? Okay, but why can't I go along? And then you'll use a comma after yes or no or okay, and then you'll continue with the rest of your sentence. Now, in this case, it's not two independent clauses, although ja and no and all of those things can stand alone. They're not two independent statements, but you'll use a comma after yes, no, okay, and the like. Then we get to the third case, and this is the one where somebody has said something in a complete sentence, made a statement, possibly upset you, and there's a full stop after whatever they said, and now you continue with, maar, hoekom is jy so onbeskof? So they've said something, and they've yapped on about something, and they're being miserable, and their sentence ends. And then you go, maar hoekom is jy so onbeskof? And in English that is, but why are you so rude? So in this case, obviously there is no comma in front of maar or but, because it is at the beginning of your sentence, but it ties your response or your sentence to the previous sentence that's been finished and has a full stop after it. Now we get to the last case. And this is the case where maar connects two parts of a sentence, but they are not both independent clauses. So, for instance, the first part or the second part in these cases cannot stand alone and make sense. So let's take a look. Oud, maar nog nie koud. Oud, maar nog nie koud. This is an Afrikaans saying. The direct or literal translation in English is old, but not yet cold. That means that they are old, but they still have a very lively sex life. The next one. Die huis is groot, maar nie netjies nie. Die huis is groot, maar nie netjies nie. The house is big, but not tidy. So the first part, die huis is groot. That part can stand alone, and it makes perfect sense as a sentence. The next part, nie netjies nie. That's not something you'll write as a sentence. It has no verb. It doesn't make sense alone. But together with the first part, it does make sense. What I failed to mention before we get to the last example is that in these cases, in English, when you're connecting two parts that are not both independent clauses, you don't use a comma in front of the but. So you'll see if it's not both two independent clauses, there is no comma in front of the but in English. But in Afrikaans, there is still a comma in front of maar. So maar gets a comma. If it's connecting two parts, whether they are independent clauses or not, it's a comma. This last example is somewhat interesting in that you can change it from the way it is now, from not having two independent clauses to having two independent clauses with just one word. And I'll show you how now. Ek het betaal vir die optrede, maar kon dit nie bywoon nie. Ek het betaal vir die optrede, maar kon dit nie bywoon nie. I paid for the show, but couldn't attend. Right, so the second part of this example it's not an independent clause, so it can't stand alone and make sense. But if you add one word to the Afrikaans sentence, ek het betaal vir die optrede, maar ek kon dit nie bywoon nie. The moment you add the subject there, then the second part is also an independent clause. Now in Afrikaans, this makes no difference, because in Afrikaans, you will have a comma in front of maar, irrespective of whether the second part is an independent clause or not. So whether you have the ek, and it's a sentence by itself, or you don't have ek, maar and the comma remains the same. In English, however, it will make a difference, because in English, it is I paid for the show, but couldn't attend. And now if you add the subject, I paid for the show, but I couldn't attend. The moment I couldn't attend, which is a sentence and can't stand alone, then you have to add a comma in front of that but. So it's just a little bit of interesting stuff. The bonus clip. These are the cases when maar is not a conjunction. The cases where I show you how we use maar in Afrikaans to accentuate, and most of the time you cannot literally or directly translate it to English. There are cases where there are words in English that can be used to cause it to mean the same or more or less be the same as the Afrikaans. But this is a very Afrikaans thing, and maar like mos is a staple of the Afrikaans language when it comes to this kind of usage. If you haven't watched my video on mos, go watch it after this one. Mos is something we use a lot, and in the way that we use it, that is definitely specific to Afrikaans. So in some cases where you can use words in the English language to change it or cause it to mean more or less the same as the Afrikaans when we use maar as a non-conjunction. The two phrases that comes to mind is but just and but only. So sometimes you can, depending on the country, depending on the dialect, you can use but in the way that we use maar in English, but it is certainly not in all cases. It really just depends, because as you'll see in the first example, you can insert but in the English, but not in all of the cases. The first one, daar was maar net 5 kinders daar. Daar was maar net 5 kinders daar. And that would be, there were but only 5 children there. Or there were but just 5 children there. You can, in that case, say that in the English language. But it simply means there were only 5 children there. And it's just accentuating. You can leave the maar out of that Afrikaans sentence and say, daar was net 5 kinders daar. And then the English is exactly the same. There were only 5 children there. This is a case where you can do the but just or but only in the English sentence. The next example, dit gaan maar sleg. Dit gaan maar sleg. Something you'll hear the Afrikaans speaking people say often. And the English is simply then, it's not going well. You can't say, it's but not going well. Not really, no. So there is a case that you cannot just insert but into the English sentence. Dit gaan maar sleg. It's not going well. You can leave the maar out, then it doesn't have the accentuation purpose. Then it's just, dit gaan sleg. It's not going well. Then those two are exactly the same. Jy kan ons maar alles vertel. Jy kan ons maar alles vertel. You can tell us everything. So you, again, correct English, you cannot say you can but tell us everything. I've heard people speak like that. It's not correct English grammar or English dialect. But some people do speak like that. However, I would say no. Jy kan ons maar alles vertel. You can tell us everything. And the last one, maak maar soos jy wil. Maak maar soos jy wil. That is a phrase very often used in interpersonal relationships in Afrikaans. When you're fed up with someone, you're just like, maak maar soos jy wil. Maak maar soos jy wil. And that just simply means do as you please. If you were to directly translate maak maar soos jy wil, it would be do as you want, or do what you want. That's it for these 3 conjunctions. I hope you learned something from this video. I hope you guys have an awesome week, and I'll see you in the next video.